Good afternoon and welcome to this Eurostat webinar for European Statistics Day 2022. I'm Tim Allen. I'm the Deputy Head of Unit of Dissemination and User Relations, and I'll be moderating this afternoon's webinar. We've got talks from a couple of my colleagues. Romina Brondino from the Dissemination Products team will tell us a bit about statistical literacy, in particular the Education Corner. And John Verinder, the Head of Unit of National Accounts Methodology, will tell us about the way we're presenting the key economic data today, these days. There'll also be a short presentation from me as well, in which I'll tell you a little bit about who we are and how we work. I'd just like to start with a little bit of housekeeping. So we are recording today's event, and it is our intention to put the recording up on the website and on the Facebook page. So if you can't watch it all, you can come back to it later. We are also taking questions for the question and answer session through Slido, and you can see on screen at the moment the number you can type into slido.com or the QR code you can follow to get the Slido Q&A session. So I think that's it for housekeeping. So I will start by introducing Jean-Pierre Poncelet, who is our Acting Director for Standards, Dissemination and European Statistical System Coordination, who will say a few words of introduction. So over to you, Jean-Pierre.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this Eurostat webinar to celebrate European Statistics Day. Maybe I should simply start by reminding you about the European Statistics Day itself. Actually, this day takes place every year on the 20th of October as an extension of the United Nations 5-yearly World Statistics Day. And the objective of today is to raise awareness among European citizens on the importance and the role of official statistics in society and at promoting their value. To function correctly, modern democracy needs to be underpinned by a solid base of reliable and objective statistics. Decision makers, be it at European level, in the member states, at local level for local authorities, and in business, need statistics to make better decisions that ultimately improve everyone's life. More generally also, all citizens in a democratic society need statistics to assess the performance of those decision makers. Independent, impartial, reliable and accessible data, free of charge for everyone, has become an essential feature of European society. More than 70 years ago, we started to cooperate with the statistical authorities of the member states, working together with Eurostat in the European statistical system to produce European official statistics and to ensure that those statistics are not only independent, impartial and reliable, accessible to all, but also comparable. This ensures that European official statistics provide comparable data for each member state and their regions, helping to illustrate the similarities and differences within the EU, as well as enabling calculation for aggregates at Euro area level and EU level. And actually, such European official statistics exist across a very wide range of fields, just to name a few: the economy, prices, inflation, trade statistics, labor market, living conditions, health data, education, environment, energy. Just visit our website and you will really find a wealth of information. And our system does not stand still. We try to be very agile and respond to new development in societies with continuous efforts to improve our data sources, use sound statistical methods, develop new technologies, and enhance our dissemination of statistics. This leads, we hope at least, to better and more readily available data. Today's webinar is just part of a package of products from Eurostat to celebrate the day. The webinar today will include a general overview of Eurostat, followed by a presentation on our work on statistical literacy and new way we are disseminating the key economic data for the Euro area and the EU. We will also disseminate the October edition of the Eurostat podcast, Starting a Wrap, which is also released today and dedicated to this European Statistics Day by presenting how our statistics are made. And I would really encourage you to listen to those podcasts. This is part of a series that we have started earlier this year. And we are also releasing two key publications today: a new youth brochure with statistics on young people in the EU and the interactive publication Key Figures on Europe. So with no further ado, I hand over to Tim Allen, who will briefly introduce the work of Eurostat.
Thank you, Jean-Pierre. And now we'll move on with the bulk of today's webinar. First of all, it's me. I'm going to do a brief presentation of who we are and what we do. So here we are, Eurostat. We are here, as Jean-Pierre has said, to celebrate European Statistics Day, and you can find much more content and output from us on our website, and we'll be releasing other news and other products during the day. So to start with who we are the Statistical Office of the European Union. For organisational purposes, we're a Directorate General of the European Commission, and we report to one of the commissioners, in our case, Paolo Gentiloni, the Italian Commissioner for the Economy and Eurostat. Our Director General is an experienced international statistician, Mariana Kotseva, a former head of the Bulgarian Statistical Office and Director General of Eurostat. And we do our work through what we call the European Statistical System. And the European Statistical System is a partnership between us, Eurostat, the national statistical institutes in the member states, any other authority in the member states that collects official statistics, and we go beyond the member states because the 4 EFTA countries are closely associated with our work through treaties and bilateral agreements. And our mission is to provide high quality statistics and data for Europe. Our work you can think of in 3 levels. We work together within the ESS, together with our partners in the member states, to define harmonised methodologies, harmonised definitions, classifications, and so on, to make sure that European statistics are comparable across the EU. We receive, process and publish data on the EU, the Euro area, the member states and the EFTA countries. And we validate data according to quality criteria. Now, the data collection is largely done within the member states, almost entirely done by the member states, by the national statistical offices, and they collect and process the data in the first phase using agreed standards and methods. The data that's collected covers all the EU policy areas, and we don't stand still. I think, as Jean-Pierre already said, we're constantly developing and introducing new sources and new techniques. I mentioned quality standards. These are set out in something we call the European Statistics Code of Practice, where we have 16 principles on how we work, on the institutional environment, on how we produce statistics and how we publish them. There are many key indicators and key principles, but in particular I'll mention 3. Professional independence. Nobody tells us what to collect and how to collect it and how to publish it. We have a commitment to quality, and we are impartial and objective.
we don't, when we publish, we don't make political comments on our data. We publish impartial and objective commentary on our data. And we have a system of monitoring of the implementation of the code, peer reviews, visiting all the statistical offices and Eurostat itself. And we're in the middle of a current round of peer reviews, and the reports are being published on our website one by one. So you can see the analysis of the work of Eurostat and the national offices against these principles. I mentioned that our work covers all the policies and priorities of the European Union. The current Commission set out some priorities when it took office. And for each of these priorities, I've listed some of our data that is relevant for monitoring and assessing progress against these policies and priorities. I'm not going to read them all out, but you can see that for each area, we've got a number of statistical collections that are relevant. I think that's what I'd like to say as a brief overview of Eurostat. I'll just remind you that everything you want, everything you need can be found on our website. The address is there. We're also active on social media, on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and LinkedIn. We have a full user support service covering as many languages as we can manage, that's accessible through our website. And for journalists, we offer a special media support service. The details of that are also available on our website. That's what I have to say about Eurostat and its work in general. I'd now like to hand over to my colleague Romina Brondino, who's going to tell you a little bit about some of our work in the area of statistical literacy. Over to you, Romina.
Thank you, Tim. Today, I would like to present to you the Eurostat Education Corner. The best way for doing this is to show to you Eurostat's website. You will find the Education Corner under the Data menu. The Education Corner is a section of Eurostat website where you can find a wide range of tools and resources that can help you understand statistics in an easier way. It is very useful for teachers, for students, but to all users that simply want to learn more about statistics. Today, I will focus on 3 types of products in particular. The first one is Statistics for Beginners. Statistics for Beginners is part of a larger Eurostat website, which is called Statistics Explained. In this section, you will find simple explanations of statistical indicators and concepts. It is divided into different workbooks, which correspond to different topics. And I will show you as example the one on labor market. There are 3 main articles here. Let's take the one on employment, for example. So in each article, there's a section called Highlights, which gives the main definitions. In this case, who are employed people. There's also a video which you can watch explaining the main definitions in labor market statistics. Below the highlights sections, you will find the full article, which goes into more details, explaining, for example, what is the employment rate, what is the methodological background. The article also includes visuals which help to clarify what is being said in the text. From this article, you can also go to articles on the same topics in Statistics for Beginners or in Statistics Explained, and you can also access our online glossary. As you can see, our Statistics for Beginners articles are in English. However, you can read the content in any of the other EU official languages by using the automatic translation widget. Now, let's go back to our Education Corner and I like to show you another product, which are interactive publications. Interactive publications combine text, which describes the main results, trends, and developments, with interactive visualizations. I'm showing to you as example Demography of Europe. This interactive publication presents European statistics related to population and looks at different aspects. Before we start, let me show you our Test Your Knowledge tool. So here you can guess how the population will be in 2080. Let's start. You need to hold and drag the circle and you bring it to 2080. And then you click on the button, How did I do? Where you can compare your guess with the actual population projections by Eurostat. What I've shown to you is the projection for the EU, but of course you can choose another country. Now let's talk a bit about the publication. It is divided into 4 main parts. These titles are quite descriptive, but inside each block you will find more specific chapters which look at demography from different angles. Let's take as example an aging population. There's quite some text here analyzing how the different age groups have evolved in the period between 2001 and 2021. Here I'm showing to you an interactive visualization on the median age. You can choose one or more countries. Let's take, for example, the European Union as a whole and Italy. And here we can see how median age has changed in the EU during the reference period. And we can see that it has increased by almost 6 years between 2001 and 2021. We can also compare the different member states in 2021 and see, for example, that the median age is highest in Italy. You can also change indicator and decide to focus specifically on the recent situation, 2021, and have a comparison between median age of men and women. These interactive visualizations are automatically connected to the Eurostat online database, which means they are updated for the selected reference year. The other way around, you can also click on Access to Dataset below the interactive visualizations, and you'll come to Eurostat online database, where you can further work with the data. For example, you can select a longer time series, or you can change the selection of country. You can rank the data by increasing or decreasing order. You can visualize them in the form of a graph or a map. And you can decide to download the data in Excel format to make your own calculations. Now, I still want to mention something about interactive publications. You can also share the visualizations in Facebook, in Twitter, by email, and you can also embed it into your website. As I mentioned before, they are in English. However, you can use the translate function at the top right-hand corner of the page to get it into another language. I will now move to the last point of my presentations, and this is visualization tools. Eurostat has developed a wide range of visualization tools. They cover a variety of statistical topics, ranging from demography, economy, environment, energy, social statistics, regional statistics. I will show you as example the interactive tool Key Figures on Europe. Interactive tools provide an access to the data which is very intuitive and visual based. In this tool, you can learn more about European statistics on different aspects, such as people and society, economy and business, environment and natural resources. To start, you select one country. In this case, we have the European Union, and we select one topic. Let's pick people and society, and we click on Enter. Inside the main thematic area, people and society, you will find more specific chapters. For instance, living conditions. This part is focusing on one indicator, which is material deprivation rate. If you want to know more about what is material deprivation rate and how it is defined, you can click on the blue icon, where you will find the definition and links to further information. The interactive visualization is showing one dimension of material deprivation rate, which is the share of people in the countries who are facing payments arrears, for example, with their mortgage or rent or utility bills. Here you can see, for example, where the share is highest, where the share is lowest. You can see where is the EU share, because this is what we have selected. And if you change your selection, you will see highlighted the country you have chosen. So in addition to comparing countries against this indicator, you can choose other indicators. For example, you want to look at the number of people, at the share of people who cannot face unexpected expenses, or those who cannot afford a one-week holiday. Again, as I mentioned before, these interactive visualizations is connected to the online database. So it is showing the latest data available for the selected year, 2021. And the other way around, you can access the data set to further work and play with the data. I think this brings me towards the end of my presentation. To conclude, the Education Corner offers plenty of resources and materials that can help you discover European statistics in an easy and simple way. I invite you to explore the Education Corner and try all the resources it includes. And I thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Romina, for that presentation. Now, before we go over to our final presentation, I'd just like to remind you again about the Slido, #3117759, and the QR code up on screen now. We're collecting questions through Slido for the Q&A session at the end. And now I will introduce our final speaker, John Verinder, who is Head of Unit for National Accounts Methodology, who's actually joining us, I believe, from the United States today because he's so keen to be part of European Statistics Day. I will also point out that John also features today in the latest edition of our podcast, where he's talking about the way we make our statistics. So I encourage you to go and listen to John talking about statistics in our podcast series. Anyway, over to you, John.
Thank you very much, Tim, and good afternoon, everybody. It's a great pleasure to join you on European Statistics Day. As Tim said, I've been a bit busy here. I'm actually in the US. We have a big international cooperation program on statistics to make sure our statistics are comparable with the worldwide statistics, so you can compare Europe and the US and other countries around the world. Anyway, the purpose of my presentation today will be to have a look at what we call the Euro indicators, and you can see, because I'm sharing my screen, our Euro indicators dashboard, which I'll spend some time going through with you today. I think it's interesting to think back to when the euro was introduced in 1999 and the statistical situation then. We didn't have so much data as we do today. We actually had a lot of statistics only on an annual basis with quite a long delay. And with the introduction of the euro, there was really a step change in the need for the data. So since then, we have expanded enormously the range of data, and also the data are much faster than they were in the past, and that's very, very important. So as I said, and which you can see, we've got something called the Euro Indicators dashboard. It's an interactive dashboard, as Romina was talking about our publications earlier. And the idea of the dashboard is basically to provide a very good overview of all of the relevant data, the economic data, the labour market data, which are relevant not only for the euro and for the management of the euro economy and the policy making, but also more broadly. As you can see from the dashboard, what we have is the indicators presented in the form of charts. There are also tables behind them of data if you're really interested to get at the numbers. But the idea of the charts is that if you actually hover over the top of the charts, as I'm doing now, you can see the data points. I'm hovering over a chart on inflation, and clearly in the current circumstances, the very unfortunate circumstances, inflation and consumer price inflation are very much in the news. And indeed, as you can see from this chart, the steep rise in the inflation rate is extremely noticeable. And you can zoom that up, and as we can see over time, you can see the inflation rate has risen to 10% basically as we arrive in September of this year. One of the nice things about the dashboard, though, is you can put these data in context, and let's have a look backwards and see where the data were in the past. And as we can see, at least going back as far as 2014 and even before, you can see that we're at historically high levels of inflation. Really, it's an incredible rise. And the other aspect of inflation, of course, is we're comparing ourselves with last year, with the same month last year. So we take the September data and we say how much have prices increased since September of the previous year. But we can also present the data in terms of a month-on-month change. So what I'm doing now is I'm changing to month-on-month. And there we can see that every month inflation has been increasing, but in some months it increases faster than in other months. So it's very important when you're looking at the data to understand, am I looking at last year, comparing with last year, or am I comparing month on month with the latest changes? The other nice thing about the dashboard is it's not just about euro area data. If you want to sort of load up data from countries, from member states, then you can easily do so. So there's a drop-down menu, and you can really pick and mix your countries and compare them with the euro area and so on that's available. So there's a very wide range of country data available behind if you wish. Now, there are many indicators in this dashboard, and so what we do, as you can see along the top, is to group the indicators according to the main areas, the main domains of statistics, the main areas of interest that users may have. So, for example, we can have a look at the consumer prices and housing prices, and here you will see that we have our inflation, month-on-month inflation on the left, top left. But if you look across, you can start to see where that inflation is being driven, and so we can break down consumer price inflation by, for example, the evolution of prices of food, alcohol, tobacco, the prices of energy, where clearly the prices of energy have been a very decisive factor in driving inflation, and so on and so on. So we can see where which types of products are driving our inflation. The other aspect of data that we can explore is the macroeconomic data that actually I work on as my day job. And here we call them the national accounts. And here, if you look at the top right, if you look at this chart here, we have what's called real GDP, so the evolution of gross domestic product. And as you can see, in the latest quarters, we've seen a significant drop in the growth rates quarter on quarter, whereas the recovery from COVID can be seen on the left side of the chart. So I think here, particularly as with our terrible experience with COVID and now the Russian aggression against Ukraine, we are seeing this feeding through into many aspects of our economic life and obviously our general life. Governments had to address the issue of COVID, so government finance is very much in the focus as well. And here you can see some data which show in the middle on the top here, this chart here is showing the annual government deficit and surplus for the euro area. And as you can see, governments really intervened so strongly during 2020 because of COVID, and subsequently in 2021, of course, that government deficits really rose enormously. The chart is inverted, so the more the line goes down, the worse the government finances situation is. And then, of course, if we can look down here in the chart on government debt, we can start to see the enormous rise in government debt in 2020, and then, you know, some reduction kicking in after the big push on government debt in 2020. I'm going to have a little look at our industry and trade data now, because I do think that not only can you look at gross domestic product for the economy as a whole in terms of the products which are there for consumption, but you can also look at the way in which industry is working, and you can look at, for example, industrial production, which is on the left here. These are changes compared to the previous month. And what you can see actually from there is that some of our data are extremely volatile. You know, industrial production moves up and down quite a lot. So there's substantial volatility, and that's where the ability to have a look at the chart, to zoom up the chart, and to actually think about how industrial production is evolving over time is also rather important. But you can see here the enormous volatility that you can get in industrial production, and in particular, have a look at what happened during COVID. Incredible movements that you don't see anywhere else in the time series. The other aspect, of course, is that industry is not the only thing, and one of the things that I'm particularly proud of in the European statistical system is the improvements in the measures of our services. So even though it's on the bottom right, probably it should be higher up, we also have services turnover. Services is a really important part of our economies now, the biggest part of our economies, and therefore the more data we can get on services and present that, the better. Now, you may be thinking, okay, things don't look so good, but we have two other areas to explore. The first area is the labour market, and I think it's probably very familiar to you that with regard to the labour market, and let's have a look at the unemployment rate here. The unemployment rate in the euro area is really low, actually. It's lower than it was before COVID, and it reflects a labour market which is not quite in line with what you're thinking when you're looking at GDP or you're looking at the other macroeconomic measures. So labour market actually looks reasonably healthy at euro area. Of course, there are variations across countries, but the labour market seems to have held up well so far. And in fact, we can see from data such as job vacancies, if we look down on the bottom right, the job vacancies have been steadily rising, in fact, quite steadily rising over time. So here what we see is a relatively buoyant labour market despite the other areas. One other forward-looking indicator, though, that actually is interesting to look at is business and consumer confidence. And here, unfortunately, the picture turns more towards doom and gloom. So we can measure the economic sentiment of different actors in our economy. And this is very much a kind of forward-looking indicator. So it's not so much a traditional statistic looking backwards, but it's asking people, how do you feel about the way things are going to go in the future? And as you can see, it's not good news. Consumer confidence has really been falling a lot in 2022, as indeed has confidence in industry and services pretty much across the board, reflecting actually the difficult situation that we're in. With the COVID recovery, there was a lot more optimism, but of course the circumstances have turned with recent events. So returning to the overview of the indicators dashboard, I think you can appreciate the enormously broad amount of data there are, but also the fact that the data are available on a monthly or a quarterly basis, and they are available pretty fast. So actually, to get a picture of the way things are evolving, you can definitely draw upon these statistics. And as you've seen from this dashboard, and as Romina has reminded us, it's not just about producing high quality, timely statistics, but it's about presenting them, and it's about getting a picture of what's going on, and it's about the ability to look across indicators and try and get a much broader view about what's happening. So I hope I've given you a good overview of the dashboard and the indicators that we have, and thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you, John. And now I'd like to move into a Q&A session with our presenters, with Romina and John and myself. A caveat to start, we do not cover all statistical areas. We're not specialists in everything. So we might suggest, if you ask us a particularly complex question, we might suggest that you put it through to our support services, where we can find the competent statistician to answer for you. But we'll try to answer as many of the questions you've asked as possible. Starting with the first one, which is very much in John's wheelhouse. How do you calculate the GDP of the EU based on the GDPs of its members? What weights are used?
Yeah, it's a very good question, because actually, if you think about it, you can aggregate in a number of different ways. Actually, the way that we aggregate is the simplest way. We take the GDPs of the countries. If the countries are not using the euro, we use the prevailing exchange rates to convert them to euros, and then we add them up. So in effect, that's the simplest kind of aggregation. You could, of course, argue that there are other ways to do it. You could not use exchange rates, but use what we call purchasing power parities, reflecting the differences in purchasing power. You could weight it by other factors, such as population or many other things. But actually, we use a rather simple method: exchange rates, aggregate to euros, and there you have the totals. Thank you.
Thank you, John. And I think the second one also falls in your area. Could the dashboard include some measures of output, such as gross output? For example, as the US Bureau of Economic Analysis use?
Yes, it's actually a good question, because the GDP that we do use actually is removing from itself the production of industry that is used to make other goods and services. So you have the total output of everybody, but then some of that output is then used in the production process to make other output. So GDP can be interpreted as the goods and the services that are available eventually for consumption or export. So, you know, the goods that have already been produced using many other goods and services. The BA here in the US actually does show output, and that's a measure which shows what's happening in the total business area. So whether you're producing for final consumers or whether you're producing for other businesses to make stuff, it is an interesting indicator of overall output. We've tended to focus, though, more on our industrial production and services turnover indicators. So rather than having this gross output picture alongside GDP, we tended, as I showed in the presentation, to focus more on industrial production and services production. And there you can get a very detailed breakdown about where that output, that production is coming from. So we haven't thought about putting the two together, but certainly it's an interesting point to reflect on. Thank you.
Thank you. We had a question about tourism statistics, which I'm afraid none of us are qualified to answer, since we're not tourism statisticians. There we're suggesting that you contact through the support services, and we'll transfer that to the expert in tourism. Then the next question is, why is there no detailed data for enlargement countries in the Eurostat database? There is data on the websites of the enlargement countries. I think I'll start with a sort of general point about enlargement countries, and then John perhaps can say something about the national accounts type data we have from them. I mean, in general, countries, member states send us data. We don't go and collect the data from other sources. We define what we want in regulations and they send it to us. So enlargement countries, as their statistical systems adapt, they send more and more data to us in more and more areas. And when they send it and when we're satisfied that it's comparable and harmonized, we load it. So we do have a certain amount of data for enlargement countries. It will differ country to country, depending on how long they've been in the process and how well they've adapted their statistical systems. So there is some data. We are aware we don't have all, but it's a process. It starts at a certain level, and the idea is by the time of accession, they're at the same level as a member state. John, can you tell us a bit about what they do in the national accounts area?
Yes, I mean, we cooperate with the enlargement countries a lot, actually, and try to encourage them to send us as much data as possible. I think in the national accounts area, you will find the key aggregates are there. I mean, that's really, really important. I think in terms of the sort of detailed breakdowns, it is indeed a bit mixed about the data that are there. It depends very much on what the countries can send us. But I would also underline that we don't necessarily publish everything that we're sent. So there is a process of validation and verification of the data, and there is a dialogue between us and the countries. This is not just enlargement countries, it's also member states. And the idea is that we have a dialogue, because sometimes you see some things in the data that you want to ask about, and you don't proceed directly to push the publication button. And I think that's actually quite an important quality process as well. But over time, as Tim said, we anticipate, and in fact we do see for many enlargement countries, a progressive improvement in the range of data that's available, and also a progressive improvement in the data that we can publish, because they pass the quality checks, and we're quite happy. Thank you.
Thank you, John. The next question was about the EU Energy and Figures Statistical Pocketbook, and whether a 2022 version is coming out. I think Romina knows the answer to that one. Romina, can you tell us about that book?
Yes, thank you, Tim. So the book which is referred to is actually produced by the Directorate General for Energy. So it's another Directorate General of the Commission. However, Eurostat has an interactive publication on energy. It is a publication combining again text and visualizations. It's updated every year. We will release the next edition in May 2023, and you can currently consult the 2022 edition, which is in Slido. Thank you.
Yes, we are trying to put links up in Slido as we go along, where the link helps the answer.
Yeah.
So the next question, does Eurostat have a strategy in place to combat the problems with fake news statistics that seem to have increased due to social media? So I'm going to do a caveat first, and we have, no, I'll do the caveat first, then I'll mention the other aspects. So for Eurostat, it's tricky because we'd be monitoring media in 27 member states plus other countries in more than 20 languages. So a lot of this is done in tight cooperation with the member states. Where we spot something or something comes up in our own social media feeds, we will try and respond, we will try and correct anything that is misinformation, disinformation. I mentioned the role of the member states, and in fact we have a strategic task force, and one of the issues they looked at was tackling misinformation, disinformation, and hopefully in Slido we've put up a link to their 2022 report on this issue, so where we've been working together with the member states around this issue. So there is a report there that you can see. Then question 7, I'm hoping John knows the answer to this because I don't. What is the minimum data entry count in order to develop a time series analysis specifically, and forecasting ? John, how many data points do we need?
Oh, that's a tough question. Well, first of all, the easy answer is as many as you can possibly get. And I think the role of statisticians, just to start off, is actually to present as long a time series as possible and as long a consistent time series as possible, so you don't have any breaks in it because of changes in definitions or something. So, for example, in the national accounts, we go back really as far as we possibly can, and at least back to 1995. In terms of the general question of forecasting, the length of the time series is very much dependent on the variable you're trying to model, and it depends on the variability, the trends, and the seasonal effects in your time series. So if you have quite a simple time series where you don't have much of seasonality, you don't have much of trends, you don't have much of business cycle, then actually you need fewer data points going back. But as soon as you get into macroeconomic analysis, you need to at least be going back one, if not two business cycles in order to see that. The other aspect, though, of modelling, of course, is, and we've seen this with COVID, is if you try and model with the COVID data in your time series, then that's an extremely disrupted time series, and it makes it extremely challenging to do the analysis. So again, it's no use modelling over a period which is unusual if you think you've returned to more normality, let's say, although unfortunately it seems these days normality is far away. Thank you.
Thank you. We have a question about working at Eurostat. Which aspects count more in the selection of candidates for a job in Eurostat? What about opportunities of curricular internship? What we've done there, we put up in Slido the link to our page about job opportunities. I'll just say a couple of things. Generally, we recruit staff through a body called the European Personnel Selection Office. We don't so much recruit directly ourselves, only certain categories of staff do we recruit more directly, but most staff we get through the European Personnel Selection Office, and their details are in that link that I've given. Same for student internships. We take part in what's at least within the Commission, it's known as the Blue Book. I don't know if the term's so widely known outside the Commission, but it's a regular programme of student internships in Commission departments, and Eurostat takes half a dozen students every 5 months, well, twice a year for 5 months as part of that. But have a look at the page, and that will tell you more about job opportunities at Eurostat. Then question 9, which is definitely for John, and it's partly what his presentation was on, but he does have other things in his pocket. Do you have a monthly analysis of the economic situation? John, do you?
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends what you mean by economic situation. We don't have monthly GDP. I guess that's the question actually here. Do you have monthly GDP? And the answer is we do not have monthly GDP. It is not something that the EU member states produce. And I think we have to bear in mind that the more and more you try to get down to monthly, weekly, or even daily data, the less real information you have and the more modelling you're doing. So we have tended to stop at quarterly national accounts because we feel that's the best balance between the timeliness available and also the data sources and therefore the quality of the data. But if you interpret the economic situation more broadly, then from the dashboard that I showed you, you've actually got a bunch of monthly indicators. You've got monthly indicators on prices, you've got monthly indicators on turnover, on the labour market, such as unemployment. So you have a lot of the levers there. What you don't have is what some of the big macroeconomic aggregates that only come out every quarter. Thank you.
Thank you, John. And then we've got one for Romina, question. Hang on, no, I may be going on one too many. We had a question 10 about exporting data to Excel, where the answer is you can export our data in a lot of different formats, including Excel, and we're putting up a link to the help page on our website that tells you about exporting data in different formats. Then we do have one for Amina, which question, for your education corner, do you also collaborate with national universities? Do you offer on-site training for students?
Yes, we do collaborate with the different member states for our education corner, and specifically with the national statistical offices, which are part of the European statistical system, as Tim mentioned in his presentation. So the cooperation is not directly with universities, but through the statistical offices. This being said, we do organize visits for groups of students from universities, from secondary schools, so everybody is welcome to visit us. The question was in particular on training. Yes, we can give training on how to get information from the database. You can have a specific presentation on a statistical domain.
Thank you. And we should be putting the link to the Visit Us page on our website there. Next question, can you introduce us to poverty indicators? I'm not sure this is something we can do quickly in orally, but yes, we do have a range of poverty indicators in the database. They're under population and social conditions. Maybe we'll try and, again, I think for that, we'll try and put a link to an appropriate part of our website into the Slido chat. But we do have some poverty indicators in our database, and we have some writing about them as well. Then we have, what are the typical statistical models used in Eurostat? John, which statistical models do you use?
Yeah, I mean, I think the word models can mean different things, but I guess what's being thought about is sort of economic modelling or that kind of modelling. We don't do economic forecasting here at Eurostat. We do have some information, some data that we produce on business cycle analysis and nowcasting and where we are in the business cycle. So we have that kind of information there, which has some underlying models to it, of course. Nowcasting is a kind of modelling process about where are we now and what are the key indicators. I think more broadly across Eurostat, though, one of the big areas where modelling is important is in the population statistics area. And here what you're basically looking at is how populations are expected to evolve. And that's one of the big jobs of Eurostat, and really a very interesting job, to look at how the population will evolve. Where will we be in 10, 20, 30 or even 80 years time? So there is a very robust and actually detailed model on population. The final aspect, though, I think, is that we also have tools for example, time series analysis. So we have tools, if you're really into the data, for example, called JDemetra Plus. That's a kind of a tool which allows you to do time series analysis. It allows you to look at seasonal patterns. It allows you to extract where the trends are in the data. And that's an important tool, and that's widely available for the analysis of the data. Thank you.
Thank you, John. And then the next question, I says quickly checking that I'm not skipping one. The next question, does the Eurostat support access to its database via APIs? To which the answer is yes. We should be putting up the link to the page on our website that tells you how to use the APIs. We've got an SDMX web service, and we've got another web service, various formats. I'm not an expert on using the APIs, but I know that we have them, and that you can access our data through APIs. How do you measure and tackle bias in a certain data set sent to Eurostat? I guess maybe, are you talking about statistical bias here, John? Do you think? I can't think. I think that's the.
Yes. Yeah, that's right, Tim. I guess the question is about statistical bias, and I think that's a really important aspect of the data that is collected by surveys in the member states. So when you're collecting data by a survey, there is a danger of bias if you are not asking a representative group of people the question. So if you just ask one group of people the question, then you will get a biased result. Here, it isn't so much measures of bias, it's more about Eurostat discussing with the member states how to conduct the surveys, how to ensure that there is a representative selection of people to ask. And that means that provided the conditions of the survey are correct, that the surveys are done properly, you can then minimize the potential bias in the data that you receive. There are some data sets in Eurostat where we also publish, I can think of pensions data, for example, that we publish, where you have some sensitivity analysis there. So, for example, pensions are very sensitive to the discount rate that you use. So we publish data saying, well, what happens if you change the assumption a little bit one way or the other? How much does that impact on the figures? So that kind of sensitivity is also helpful for people to get a feel for, are the assumptions that we're making, if they're a bit biased, what would the impact be on the totals? Thank you.
Thank you. Right, I think we're putting in the link to our user support on Slido, because if you have a question that hasn't been answered, user support's the best place to send it, where we can send it around to the correct place. Then, oh yes, I was going to follow up a little bit on question 15, on the question about bias. One thing I will point out that all our data in our database comes with attached metadata. So there's a metadata sheet for each data set that gives some information that includes quality and so on. And for we publish two series, we publish a lot of interesting publications, but two series that are relevant to this. In our statistical report series, we very often we publish quality reports on some of our surveys, which will summarise these sort of quality issues. And then in our statistical working papers series, you'll even see working papers on how to reduce things like non-sampling errors and how to better design your surveys. So we have work and information in this area. Yeah. Okay, I'm looking at the time, and I think we have more or less come to the end of our session. We've come to the end of the time we allotted. I would just like to remind you that we will put up in Slido a sort of satisfaction survey where you can tell us whether you liked our webinar or not. And I think maybe you can make suggestions for future topics, I'm not sure. So we certainly encourage you to complete that survey for us so we get some feedback. As I said, this session has been recorded, and assuming the recording went through soundly, then we will shortly, as soon as it's been processed, we'll put it up on our website and on our Facebook page so that you can refer back to it or share it with your friends and family. Otherwise, it just remains for me to say that we are enjoying European Statistics Day. We hope you are as well, and we look forward to seeing you again. We run these webinars regularly, about once a month. I must admit, I'm not sure what the next topic in the calendar is, but there should be one coming up shortly. And this time next year, we will be back again for European Statistics Day 2023. So thank you all for listening. Thank you, John. Thank you, Romina. And thank you, Jean-Pierre, for your presentations.